The courtroom hummed with whispers as Darius Rowe, 36, stood alone at the defense table, his navy suit pressed but a touch threadbare. Across from him, Bryce Landon, the bank's litigator, lounged with ease, while Judge Evan Crowell smirked from the bench. "Representing yourself, Mr. Rowe?" the judge quipped, gavel tapping. "This should be fun." Darius didn't blink. He met Crowell's eyes and answered evenly, "I'm not here for entertainment, Your Honor. I'm here to win." Could one uncredentialed man unmask corruption in open court? Before we jump in, drop where you're watching from in the comments. If you ride for justice, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. 6 months earlier, Darius Rowe stood on the cracked porch of his mother's house, morning sun throwing long shadows across weathered steps. The modest place, 3 generations strong, felt less like property than lineage, the last piece of his late mother's legacy. In his hand, an eviction notice stamped final, ordering the home vacated in 14 days. Darius blinked hard, throat tightening as he reread the language. His mother, Ella Rowe, had worked 2 jobs to keep this roof. She died believing it was safe, paid off, clean. How could it be threatened now? Heart-hammering, he dove into the living room file cabinet. Mortgage statements, tax receipts, the original deed. Everything aligned. Then a stranger. A second mortgage agreement bearing Ella's name. The handwriting wobbled, slanted. Nothing like her script. The notary stamp looked official, but the ink seemed uneven, like a copy. His first call was to the bank. He waited almost 30 minutes, knee bouncing, before a clipped voice answered. "Foreclosure Department, First Meridian Bank." "I'm calling about an eviction notice for Ella Rowe's property," Darius said. "There's a mistake. The mortgage is paid off." "Sir, the account is in default on a second mortgage from 2 years ago. Proceedings are final." "Impossible," Darius said. "My mother never took one." "File a request with legal," she replied coolly. "It won't stop the eviction." The call ended. Darius drove straight to the branch and met Garrett Klein, the manager, a middle-aged white man with a smug, practiced smile. Klein skimmed the papers and slid them back. "If you're in default, you lose the house. That's how it works." Darius leaned in. "Look at this signature on the second mortgage. It isn't my mother's." Klein's smirk didn't budge. "Signatures change. People make desperate choices." "She didn't take this loan," Darius said. "Then hire a lawyer quickly," Klein replied. "You have 2 weeks." Lawyers weren't an option. After corporate downsizing killed his social work job, Darius scraped by as a part-time janitor at the community center, every paycheck swallowed by rent, food, and light bills. That night, he spread papers across the kitchen table, eyes burning over fine print. His phone buzzed. "Kayla, his girlfriend, 34. How bad, bad," he typed, "but I'm not quitting." Morning brought legal aid. "We're at capacity," the receptionist said. Private firms followed with conflicts, workload, or bluntly, "We don't take unwinnable cases." When he returned, a white notice clung to the door. Sheriff's eviction in 10 days. His chest pounded. That evening he caught a town hall, hoping to reach Councilman Brent Hollis, known for outreach. Hollis offered a smile and paternal pat. "I sympathize." But the bank followed procedure. "Your best move is alternative housing." "This isn't just a house," Darius said. "It's my family's history." Hollis's smile thinned. "History doesn't pay the bills, son." The word hung heavy. They'd decided he didn't belong here. Darius went home drained, but unbroken. Sitting on his mother's bed, the weight of generations pressed down until a single thought cleared the fog. If they expect me to walk away quietly, they don't know me. He sat at the kitchen table past midnight, papers covering the wood. Eviction notice glaring in red. For 6 hours he cross-checked every line, and the second mortgage still made no sense. The ink looked faded, uneven, like a reproduction. He opened his laptop and searched. Mortgage fraud cases. Page after page of foreclosure nightmares scrolled past. Families tossed out over paperwork glitches, predatory terms, forged signatures. One case grabbed him. Martin v. Horizon Bank, where the homeowner beat foreclosure by proving an invalid transfer. The key, demanding every document. If lawyers wouldn't help, he'd help himself. Laws were written, he could read them. At 3:12 a.m., sleep felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. He brewed more coffee and kept digging, eyes burning, pen scratching notes across a yellow pad. Morning, he headed downtown. The courthouse's marble steps shone in light, but bias felt baked into the walls. After an hour in line, he reached the clerk's window. "I need to file a motion to stay the eviction," he said, sliding forms over. The clerk, a middle-aged white woman with sharp eyes, glanced once. "Are you representing yourself?" "Yes," she sighed. "You'd be better off with an attorney. These rarely end well for pro se defendants." "File it anyway," Darius said. She stamped it. By noon, he was back on the porch, exhaustion dragging at his limbs. Flipping through paperwork, his phone buzzed. "Kayla." "Any luck?" "I filed for a stay," he said. "Long shot, but something." "You can't keep pushing like this," she said. "What if they toss everything out while you're at work?" "I can't think about that," he muttered. "This isn't just a house. It's standing up to people who think money and connections rule." She exhaled. "Just don't let the fight consume you." 2 days later, the court responded. Motion denied. Darius stood in the hallway, rejection trembling in his hand, dread thudding in his chest. He'd followed the rules and still hit a locked door. Fueled by frustration, he marched into the branch. Garrett Klein sipped coffee behind a glossy desk, unbothered. "Show me the original second mortgage file," Darius demanded. Klein leaned back. "Foreclosure's final. You're wasting time." "Then prove it." "File a discovery request," Klein said, bored. "Otherwise, this conversation is over." That evening, back at the community center, Darius mopped empty halls while frustration rattled his ribs. Mrs. Hightower, an elderly black volunteer who'd outlasted the civil rights era, paused to watch. "Baby, looks like the world's on your shoulders," she said. He managed a thin smile. "Feels that way. My daddy said, when they push you to the edge, you've got two choices, fall or fight. If you fight, learn their game better than they do." The word burned. Law. That night, he cleared the table, stacked library law books, printed foreclosure guidelines, and started highlighting, cross-referencing, scribbling notes. Sleep became optional. Every free minute, he pored over statutes until days blurred. Then he found it. A single line. Every mortgage transfer required a valid endorsement from the prior lender. He pulled the bank's filings and froze. The last transfer of his mother's loan lacked endorsement. Legally, the bank lacked standing to foreclose. His pulse kicked. He drafted a discovery motion demanding the entire file. 2 days later, the court responded again. Motion for discovery granted. On his couch, paper trembling in his hands, Darius exhaled. He'd forced the system to acknowledge him. Relief rushed in, chased by a colder thought. They wouldn't take this quietly. A wounded institution retaliates. He braced for impact, copied everything twice, and made a checklist. If the bank had to open its books, the truth might finally surface. But he knew they would try to make him pay for that small victory. Retaliation came fast. By morning, his checking account was suddenly under review. Auto payments bounced, and the lights died by evening. When he called, a representative blamed a technical glitch, but Garrett Klein's smug tone on a follow-up call said otherwise. As dusk fell, his old sedan vanished from the curb. "Repossession," a neighbor called out. They weren't just contesting a filing, they were trying to break him, piece by piece, until quitting felt inevitable. Darius clenched his jaw. They misread him. This stopped being about one address. It became a stand for everyone steamrolled by a machine designed to grind powerless people flat. Was he pushing too far, risking everything for a battle he couldn't win? or stepping into the moment that would define him. Comment 1 if you believe he should keep fighting. Odds stacked high. And if you stand for justice, like, subscribe, and share. But here's the deeper question. If the system is rotten, how far must he go to expose it and survive? The discovery order wasn't just a lifeline, it was a blade. Used right, it could cut. Next morning, Darius marched into the courthouse with a detailed demand: original mortgage, all transfers, and the notarized second mortgage papers. At the window, a younger black clerk named Tanya scanned the pages and gave a knowing half smile. "Fighting the bank?" she asked softly. "Every day," he muttered. She stamped the request. "Most people quit by now. Good luck." "Luck's not saving me," he said. "Paper will." 3 days later, the bank answered, not with documents, but a motion to toss his request as overbroad and burdensome. Darius read it twice, anger rising with each sentence. He drafted a point-by-point reply, citing case law he'd mined at 2 a.m., and hand-delivered it. That afternoon, a call came from Judge Crowell's chambers. In-person hearing to address the scope. He knew what it meant, a stage for the bank to crush him in public and call it procedure. 2 days later, Darius faced Bryce Landon in open court, slick hair, tailored suit, a smile like a blade. "Your Honor," Landon purred, "this is a fishing expedition. Mr. Rowe is stalling a lawful foreclosure." Judge Crowell lounged. "Why make the bank jump through hoops, Mr. Rowe?" Darius held up 2 copies, the original agreement and the second mortgage form. "Look at these signatures. They don't match, and the second was signed the day after my mother's stroke." Crowell's eyes narrowed. "Discovery stands. 7 days." Outside, his phone buzzed before he hit the steps. "Kayla, did you win?" "Not a win," he said, watching the doors. "But they have to hand over the papers." A pause. "And if they don't, then it's worse than I thought." He slid the phone away as wind kicked across the plaza, tugging at his jacket. 7 days was a lifetime in courthouse time, and an eternity for a bank with secrets. He braced for moves meant to knock a man sideways. He didn't get 7 days. On day 3, he found 2 movers dragging his grandmother's couch through the door. "What are you doing?" he shouted, racing up the steps. A sheriff's deputy in mirrored shades held a fresh order signed by Judge Crowell. "Bank filed new evidence this morning," the deputy said. "Foreclosure's final." The evidence was a revised transfer, suddenly polished and notarized. Neighbors peeked from curtains. One man smirked, arms folded. By nightfall, generations of memory sat on the curb. He sat on the steps until the streetlights flicked on, the house a hollow shadow behind him. Kayla called, "Come stay with me. You can't sleep out there." He stared at the empty doorway and couldn't move. This wasn't just loss. It was erasure. They'd forged, weaponized, and steamrolled, and gotten away with it. He rose slowly, resolve hardening like steel. If they wanted war, he'd give them war. He wasn't fighting for a roof now, but for justice and his mother's name. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Darius is right to keep going, no matter the cost. Like, subscribe, and share if you're writing for accountability, because the bigger question isn't whether he can stomach the fight, it's whether a rigged system can be forced to answer for itself. When power doubles down, what ruthless move comes next? And what does a man risk to meet it head on? Stay with us. The next turn is coming. Morning, in the dim motel kitchen, he gathered copies and walked back to the courthouse, pace steady despite bone-deep fatigue. He filed an emergency motion contesting the eviction, attaching the suspect documents the bank had slipped in. The clerk skimmed, offering a tired, pitying look. "Back again, Mr. Rowe. You really think you can win this?" His jaw set. "I don't think," he said quietly. "I know." She stamped the motion and slid it along, eyes softening for the briefest second. As he stepped outside, a patrol car rolled to a slow stop. The officer, pale with a buzz cut and mirrored shades, leaned out. "Mr. Rowe, got a report about someone matching your description loitering around private property?" He gestured toward the courthouse. "I'm filing legal documents," Darius said. "That's what courthouses are for." The smirk said otherwise. "Just making sure you're not causing trouble. You know how it is." He did, all too well. That evening, Darius nursed bitter coffee in the community center break room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Mrs. Hightower shuffled in and sat across from him, concern creasing her face. "Baby, you look like you've been fighting the whole world." He tried a smile. "Feels like it." "Don't let them beat you down," she said, voice firm, carrying decades of grit. "You've got more fight than they counted on." He tucked the words away like a talisman and headed back into the night. 2 days later, while he reviewed filings at a diner, an alert pinged. Account frozen for suspicious activity. Without cash, the motel locked him out by dusk. As he stepped outside, 2 deputies approached, hands drifting toward holsters. "Darius Rowe?" "Yeah. Come with us. Report says you were trespassing at a private residence." "I haven't been near that place since the eviction," he snapped. Hours in a holding cell followed. No charge, just questioning. The message landed anyway. "Back off or we make it hurt." Released before dawn, phone dead and wallet thin, he sat on a bench outside the station until the sky bruised purple to gray. Hunger gnawed, but he headed for the library instead. There, between coffee breath and quiet keyboards, he found another crack. The mortgage changed hands 3 times, yet the final transfer lacked a crucial endorsement. No endorsement, no standing. He filed a fresh motion, challenging the bank's right to foreclose at all, stapling the missing piece to the front. Outside the courthouse, Bryce Landon waited on the steps, arms crossed, smile practiced. "Mr. Rowe," he drawled, "charming persistence. We've already moved to dismiss your latest filing." Darius didn't flinch. "The law doesn't care how many tailored suits you own. Without standing, you don't have a case." Landon's smile slipped a fraction, then returned. "We'll see." But Darius saw it. Hairline stress in marble. Inside, clerks moved like clockwork. Outside, wind curled around columns. For the first time, he felt ground tilt in his favor. That evening, the community center's director, Todd Brewer, waited by the door, arms folded. "Darius, I hate this," he began, avoiding eye contact. "We've had complaints. People say you're drawing the wrong attention. Donors are jumpy." Darius blinked. "You're firing me?" Brewer nodded. "I can't lose funding over this." They weren't just targeting his case. They were closing every outlet, job, money, and shelter, until survival itself felt like punishment. He left with a broom, a jacket, and a name tag that read like a joke. By the time he slipped back into the motel through a side door, he was running on fumes. He collapsed on the mattress, staring at a cracked ceiling that looked like a map of bad options. Was this fight winnable? Or was he shoving against a wall too thick to budge? Drop a 1 if he should keep going, no matter the cost. If the system can erase a man inch by inch, what does it take to stop it before it finishes the job? Morning at the library, he filled a table with statutes and copies. A woman watched from across the room, then approached and set down a thick folder. "You're fighting First Meridian, right?" she asked. "Who's asking?" "Lena Ortega, paralegal. I used to work in their legal department." Inside, internal memos, emails, scanned pages marked confidential. One memo called for priority processing in high-risk corridors, code for black and brown neighborhoods, urging evictions to dodge litigation. Darius's stomach clenched. He suspected it. Seeing it spelled out burned. "Why bring this to me?" he asked, still wary. Lena's eyes were tired but fierce. "I quit after watching families lose homes because they didn't know how to fight back, couldn't live with it. I made copies before I left." She straightened. "If the bank comes after me, so be it. Use it." He nodded, fingers tightening on the folder like a rope. "Thank you," he said, meaning it. "This changes everything." A door in his mind finally opened. 2 days later, he found Lena waiting outside the library, pale and shaking. "They fired me," she said. "Someone tipped them off about the copies. My bank account is frozen, just like yours. The institution wasn't defending. It was punishing. Lay low, Darius urged. They're not only after me anymore. They'll hit anyone who helps. Lena hugged her arms, nodded. Be careful, Darius. They played dirty. He watched her go, fury and gratitude braided tight in his chest. That night, in a 24-hour diner, nursing burnt coffee, his phone lit with an unknown number. Mr. Rowe, Bryce Landon said smoothly, let's settle this quietly. Walk away, we unfreeze your accounts, clean your credit, offer a relocation stipend. Start fresh. And if I don't? The politeness fell away. Then we bury you in motions and delays. You'll lose the house, your prospects, everything, and wish you'd taken the deal. The line clicked dead. He stared at the screen, anger building like heat under steel. Morning! He filed a motion demanding a full audit of every transfer under the state's anti-predatory lending statute. Long shot or not, it was the only card left that might force sunlight into the record. He stapled Lena's memos as exhibits and walked the bundle to the window. The clerk stamped without comment, eyes briefly lifting in what looked like quiet respect. Outside, clouds stacked like case files, gray on gray. He drew a breath that tasted like metal and braced for the counterpunch. His phone buzzed. Kayla's voice was tight. 2 men were outside my building last night, watching the door. I called the cops. They shrugged. Silence stretched. This isn't just about you anymore, she said. I can't stop, Darius answered. If they win, it's every family they've steamrolled, everybody who never got to fight back. Another beat, then fine, then fight smart. They're playing for keeps. He leaned against a brick wall, pulse hard in his throat. I will. Back in the flicker of the motel's neon, he spread Lena's folder again. The evidence was strong, but paperwork alone wouldn't topple them. He needed a witness no motion could spin, the notary. If the notary hadn't actually watched the signing, the second mortgage collapsed on contact. Fraud, perjury. He dug through state databases until a name surfaced. Denise Fuller, licensed notary, last listed 2 towns over. If he could find her, and if she would talk, everything might change. In a car, he drove 2 towns over to a bungalow with a faded "Beware of Dogs" sign. A black woman cracked the door. Miss Fuller, I need to ask about this notarization, he said, her face drained. I can't help you. Please, families are losing everything over stamps like this. She exhaled. I didn't witness it. A bank runner brought it, said the client was sick. I stamped. She stared at the floor. If I testify, they'll ruin me. Truth matter, he said. She agreed. With Denise's written statement, he filed an emergency motion to reopen based on newly discovered fraud. Judge Crowell, clearly irritated by his persistence, yet hemmed in by the affidavit, set a hearing for the following week. It wasn't relief, but it was momentum, a small current pushing against a heavy tide. He ran more copies than he could count, sealed sets in envelopes, and stashed them in 3 different places, repeating under his breath, preparation beats sabotage. 2 days later, his motel door hung ajar, lock splintered. Inside, drawers were overturned, papers scattered like confetti. His laptop was gone. Panic surged. Lena's folder, missing. He called, voicemail. Called again, nothing. Denise picked up, voice shaking. 2 men came to my job, asking questions. They knew I talked to you. He stared at the busted jam, phone pressed to his ear. Retaliation wasn't a tactic anymore. It was the plan. Pressure every ally until the case collapsed. He barely slept before the hearing. Gas station coffee and adrenaline carried him as he built binders, statutes, cases, timelines, exhibits, and fresh copies of everything stolen. He rehearsed answers under his breath, paced the narrow room, and memorized citations like scripture until the index tabs felt like armor. This wasn't just about his roof anymore. It was about exposing a pattern bigger than one family's loss and making a court say it aloud. He set his alarm for sunrise and kept working anyway. The day of the hearing, the air in the courtroom felt charged. Bryce Landon sat at counsel table, smug polished into something colder. Judge Crowell barely glanced at Darius. Back again? Yes, Your Honor, Darius said, lifting Denise Fuller's affidavit. The notary confirmed she never witnessed the signature on the second mortgage. That document is fraudulent. Objection, Landon snapped. Baseless, intended to delay. Crowell frowned, eyes on the paper. Temporary stay of foreclosure granted pending investigation. Relief hit like rain after drought. That night, an anonymous text blinked onto his phone. You should have taken the settlement. This isn't over. He stared until the glow faded, then came back, as if the screen wanted the threat carved into memory. He set the phone face down and listened to the motel ice machine rattle. A wounded predator is more dangerous than a hungry one. He'd kicked the nest, and he knew what came next. Harder hits, fewer rules. The stay felt like the first clean breath after weeks underwater. But Darius knew better than to celebrate. A wounded institution doesn't retreat, it lunges. He spent the afternoon duplicating files, tucking sealed envelopes at a friend's barber shop and under Mrs. Hightower's church office desk. He labeled binders, rehearsed answers, and taped a checklist above the motel desk. Copies, affidavit, timeline, exhibits. As dusk cooled the sidewalks, he headed for the community center, broom closet still smelling like lemon cleaner and cheap resolve, ready for a quiet shift that never came. Todd Brewer, the community center director, waited at the entrance with his arms crossed and worry carved into his face. Darius, I hate this, he began, eyes skittering past. We've gotten calls, complaints. Donors are nervous. They don't want the center pulled into controversy. Darius's stomach dipped. You're firing me. Brewer rubbed his brow. I can't lose funding over this. The words landed like a gavel. Job gone. Paycheck gone. One more prop kicked from under him. Outside, the city's fluorescent buzz swallowed the sound of his name tag hitting the trash. He slipped back into the motel through the side door, dodging the front desk clerk's glance. The hall smelled of old carpet and cigarette ghosts. In his room, the mattress sank a little deeper than yesterday, the ceiling cracked spiderwebbing wider. Running on fumes and willpower, he counted cash, 3 wrinkled bills and a handful of coins. He brushed his hand across a stack of copies, like blessing them. Was the fight winnable? Or was he just learning how slowly a system erases a man? Morning brought a rumbling hunger his pride had learned to ignore. He nursed motel coffee that tasted like burnt pennies and walked to the library. Row by row, he mined case law, foreclosure statutes, and civil rights claims, filling a fresh yellow pad with tight handwriting until fatigue blurred the lines. Stripped bare, job, home, money, he clung to the last thing they couldn't freeze or seize. His mind. He wasn't simply filing papers. He was building a scaffold for truth to climb above their fog. He didn't notice the woman until she set a thick folder on the table with a measured thud. You're up against First Meridian, right? She asked, voice low. Depends who's asking, Darius said, guarding his face. Lena Ortega, she replied, tugging at a cardigan cuff. Paralegal. I was in their legal department. Inside the folder, internal memos, emails, scan-stamped confidential. One memo flagged priority processing for high-risk corridors, urging evictions before defense is formed. Darius felt heat rise. He'd suspected targeting. Seeing it laid out felt like a slap. Why bring this to me? He asked, still skeptical. Lena's eyes held tired fire. I watched too many families lose homes because they didn't know how to answer filings stamped in Latin, she said. I quit, but before I walked, I copied what mattered. She inhaled. Use it. He thumbed the edge of a memo. Expedited evictions, minimized litigation exposure, advanced timelines in majority black and brown neighborhoods. Corporate euphemisms curdled into plain cruelty. Thank you, he said. This could finally force sunlight where they never expected it. Lena tapped a page. You'll need more than outrage. Tie each memo to a procedural act. Who signed, what step it affected, where it deviated from statute. Make a chain a judge can't pretend not to see. Darius nodded, sketching arrows and dates. lining memos beside transfer records, and missing endorsements like a crime board without string. Evidence was fuel, structure was engine. "If they come after you," he asked, Lena's jaw set. "They already did. I'd rather live with risk than live with silence." 2 days later, Lena stood pale on the library steps, fingers gripping her phone. "They fired me," she said. "Somebody tipped them off about the copies." She swallowed. "My account's frozen. Rent's due Friday." The institution wasn't defending. It was punishing. "Lay low," Darius said. "Don't pick up unfamiliar numbers. Keep your documents with someone you trust." Lena nodded, staring past him toward a sky thick with summer heat. "If they can do this over paper," she whispered, "imagine what they do where nobody's looking." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I can't stop." Lena hugged herself. "Then promise me you'll fight smart. Precision, not pride." "I'll try," he said. They parted with the brittle awkwardness of soldiers stepping off the same truck toward different fronts. Back inside, he annotated memos with statutes, stapled copies in triplicate, and drafted requests that sounded like they were written by a man with an office and a team. If he couldn't buy polish, he'd manufacture it with time and grit. The unknown number came as he left the library. "Mr. Rowe," Bryce Landon said, tone smooth as glass. "Let's avoid further mess. Walk away and we'll unfreeze your accounts, scrub the credit slate, and fund a reasonable relocation. You can start fresh somewhere else without this drama." Darius stared at a cracked sidewalk seam. "And if I decline," the mask slipped, "then we bury you in procedure until you forget what sunlight feels like. You'll wish you'd taken the offer, and then some." "You're bluffing," Darius said, though he felt the bluff's weight in his chest. "The law cares about standing, not suits." A beat of silence. "The law cares about who writes it and who pays to interpret it," Landon replied, voice cooling. "Last call, Mr. Rowe." Darius ended the call, pulse loud in his ear. He leaned against brick until it scraped his shoulder blades back into focus. A deal dressed like mercy is still a muzzle. He walked to the courthouse instead. He filed a motion demanding a full audit under the state's anti-predatory lending statute. Every transfer, each signature, time-stamped movement across custodians, chain of title gaps, and any related communications. He attached Alina's memos as exhibits, arrows linking their euphemisms to concrete steps. The clerk stamped in practiced rhythm, eyes flickering up with something adjacent to respect. Outside, clouds gathered without deciding whether to break. He folded his receipt into his wallet, alongside a picture of his mother lighting a match over the paid-off mortgage. His phone buzzed. Kayla's voice trembled. "2 men were outside my building again watching. I called the cops. They shrugged. 'Nothing to report,' they said." Darius's jaw tightened. "Pack a bag and stay with your cousin tonight." "I'm not running," she said, anger fighting fear. "Then at least don't walk alone. Let the super know. Keep your phone charged." Silence dragged. "This isn't just about you anymore," she said. He closed his eyes. "I know. That's why I can't let it stop with me." "Then fight smart," Kayla said. "Not loud. Smart." He smiled, humorless and grateful. "That's the plan." After the call, he stood in the shade outside the courthouse, weighing moves. Paper was winning small pauses, but paper alone wouldn't break their favorite tricks. He needed something they couldn't recast as routine, a witness whose words landed like a hammer. The notary. If she hadn't witnessed the signature, the second mortgage was a house of cards. He opened his notes and started digging again. In the motel's harsh lamplight, he hunted state notary records until names swam. Finally, Denise Fuller, licensed, last active address 2 towns over. Adrenaline cut through exhaustion. He mapped a route, backed up Denise's listing with an old business directory, and wrote 3 questions in block letters on an index card. "Did you physically witness the signing? Were IDs presented by the signatory? Who brought the document to you?" He tucked the card into his pocket like a talisman and tried to close his eyes. The small house, with peeling paint and a sun-faded "Beware of Dogs" sign, matched the listing. Denise opened the door a cautious inch, eyes moving from his face to the paper he held. "Miss Fuller, I'm not here to cause trouble," Darius said, "but a family's home was taken on a second mortgage you notarized. Did you witness the signature?" Her throat worked. "A runner brought it, said the client was ill. I stamped it." She stared at the floor. "I shouldn't have." "You can help fix it," he said. Denise's hands trembled. "If I testify, they'll wreck my life, my job, my apartment." Darius didn't pretend safety existed. He offered the only honest thing he had. "If we don't stand here, they'll keep targeting the people least able to fight. Your word can stop the pattern from swallowing another family." A long breath, then a nod. "I'll sign an affidavit," she said. They sat at her kitchen table, and Darius wrote the statement while Denise read each line out loud before adding her name. With Denise's affidavit secured, he filed an emergency motion to reopen based on newly discovered fraud. The clerk's eyebrows rose as she stamped. Judge Crowell's chambers called later. A hearing was set for the following week. Irritation colored the scheduler's tone, but the date was real ink. Darius walked out into late light that made the courthouse columns look almost generous. He allowed himself 3 slow breaths. After that, he photocopied the affidavit 5 times and hid each copy in a different safe pair of hands. The motel door hung crooked when he returned. The lock was splintered, mattress ransacked, drawers gutted. His laptop was gone. His folders rifled. Panic gathered fast, then thinned as he found the core stack in the tub under towels, exactly where he'd left it. But the extra set of Lena's memos, missing. He dialed voicemail. Again voicemail. He called Denise next. She answered with a shaking whisper. 2 men came to my office. They asked about my stamp, my files, about you." The room tilted. "Are you safe?" "For now. Or document everything," he said. "Time, descriptions, questions. Don't meet anyone alone. If they call, let it go to voicemail." He hung up and pressed his palms into his eyes until fireworks exploded behind lids. This wasn't random theft. It was a message, carved into wood, and fear. He got dressed again, walked to the corner store for a cheap notebook, and labeled it Witness Log. If they wanted to terrorize, he'd turn terror into evidence. Then he sat and rebuilt every missing page from memory. The days before the hearing bled together. Gas station coffee, highlighter ink, and the rubber band sting of binders snapping shut. He rehearsed at the mirror, questions and answers stripped of apology. He cut exhibits down to essentials and stacked them in the exact order he'd need them. He wrote a 1-page timeline like a spine and taped it inside the front cover of his main binder. When sleep broke apart, he did push-ups until his breath slowed. Preparation was survival. Precision was mercy. Courtroom air felt thick enough to chew. Landon's usual smirk had sharpened into something leaner. Judge Crowell shuffled papers without looking up. "Back again, Mr. Rowe?" "Yes, Your Honor." Darius held up Denise's affidavit. "The notary confirms she did not witness the signature on the second mortgage. The document is fraudulent." "Objection!" Landon snapped, already on his feet. "Unfounded, designed only to delay." Crowell's frown deepened. He read, jaw working. "Temporary stay of foreclosure pending investigation." The gavel's light tap sounded like thunder rolling across tile. That night, a text arrived from an unknown number. "You should have taken the settlement. This isn't over." Darius stared until the screen dimmed on its own, then lit again, as if the threat wanted to be the room's only lamp. He set the phone face down and listened to the ice machine stutter awake down the hall. He'd wanted a clean fight. He got a street fight in a borrowed suit. He breathed in through his nose, out through his teeth, and wrote tomorrow's plan. 2 days later, he returned to the courthouse to check the docket. The clerk, a middle-aged white woman with tired eyes, typed, frowned, typed again. "Your case is flagged for procedural review," she said. Removed from the active docket, pending evaluation. Darius's chest went weightless. But the judge granted a stay. She lifted a shoulder. An emergency motion to reconsider was filed. Until it's reviewed, the stay is effectively paused. A loophole dressed like process? He thanked her anyway and stepped aside to keep from swaying. In the hallway's hum, he flipped open his notebook. Reconsideration bought them time to reshuffle and intimidate. He underlined 3 words, maintain pressure, then circled Denise and Lena's names like sacred text. He couldn't lose them. He walked outside, letting the late heat slap his face awake, and reviewed what could move right now. File a notice of witness intimidation, press for a hearing on standing, and supplement the record with a chain of title gap chart. The plan steadied his knees better than air. His phone rang. Denise sounded near tears. "They froze my account," she said. "My paycheck bounced, and my landlord's already threatening me. I did the right thing, and I'm getting crushed." Darius's throat tightened. "I'm filing a notice this afternoon. Witness tampering and retaliation. Will that stop them?" "It forces it into the record. Judges ignore a lot. They hate ignoring patterns on paper." She exhaled shakily. "I trusted you." "I know," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere. We finish what we started." Another call cut in. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Landon's voice slid across the line. My, you've stirred quite the mess. Clerks hate messy dockets." "Clerks hate bullies," Darius said. "Interesting theory," Landon replied. "Let me offer practical advice. Stop before the pattern you're chasing swallows you. People who cross swords with institutions tend to discover we have a longer arm." Darius looked at his reflection in a darkened window, tired, unshaven, unbroken. "I've met longer arms," he said, and ended the call. He walked back toward the motel, counting the squares in the buckled sidewalk just to keep from feeling the ground slide. The front lobby buzzed with a small argument over towels, the desk clerk distracted, keys jingling. He angled for the stairs and paused, watching a security monitor flicker with grainy footage of a hallway, his hallway. For a heartbeat, he imagined his door splintering again, papers flying like frightened birds. He tightened his grip on the binder until its edge pressed a groove into his palm. On the landing, his phone vibrated once more. Denise again, breathless. "2 men followed me from work," she said. "They didn't touch me, just walked behind. I ducked into a pharmacy and waited them out." Darius swallowed. "Text me the time, exact route, descriptions, anything you remember. We'll add it to the notice, and stay with a friend tonight, please." A beat. "Okay," she whispered. "I hate being scared." "Me too," he said. "Fear's their tool, because facts aren't." He ended the call and kept climbing. At the top stair, the phone rang again. Unknown number. He almost let it die. "Mr. Rowe," Landon purred, as if picking up a conversation he'd never ended. "I warned you this would happen. You've made enemies you can't even see yet. Walk away and we can pretend this was a misunderstanding. Keep going and you'll learn how much pain procedure can inflict." Darius could hear the smile. "We're done here," he said, unlocking the door. The line clicked dead. The binder felt heavier, and so did his resolve. The front desk manager, Mr. Clark, waited with folded arms. "Mr. Rowe, your card bounced. You're 2 nights behind. Pay by morning or you're out." Darius didn't argue. What good would it do? His accounts were frozen, savings gone. He stuffed his few belongings into a backpack and crashed in the borrowed sedan, tucked in a dim corner of the community center lot. The irony stung, fighting for a home while sleeping behind fogged glass. At sunrise, hunger gnawed as he headed to the library. He bought the bitterest coffee with his last crumpled dollar and slid into a back table, spreading the notes he'd stitched together through sleepless weeks. His phone buzzed. "Lena, Ortega. Call me. Found something." He dialed immediately. Lena whispered fast. One last peek into the bank's internal system before access vanished. An email thread between Landon and Klein, bragging about accelerating eviction by pushing revised filings past a sleepy docket. They knew the judge wouldn't look closely, she said. You have the emails. Screenshots, she breathed. If I share them, I'm finished. Blacklisted, Lena said. I get it, Darius answered, voice low. But this isn't just me anymore. A heavy sigh crossed the line. I'll send them, but be careful. They're playing for keeps. Minutes later, screenshots landed. Messages among Bryce Landon, Garrett Klein, and Judge Crowell's assistant discussing bypasses, urgent routing, and stepping around routine checks to hurry Darius's foreclosure. It was stark, shameless corruption, the kind that could crack a case wide open if daylight touched it. Before he could file the new exhibits, the bank hit first. At a FedEx counter, printing copies, his phone rang. Kayla, voice trembling. 2 guys in suits came to my job. Asked my manager if I was mixed up in illegal activity. He said if I stir more heat, I'm done. Darius shut his eyes as the weight pressed down. They weren't just aiming at him anymore. They were punishing every helper. Lena, Denise, Kayla. This wasn't litigation. It was destruction by design. When he reached the motel that evening, his keycard died. The lock had been reprogrammed. The manager, stocky, scowling, stood firm. No access without payment. Darius didn't plead. He slung his backpack and walked away, shoulders heavy, with a fatigue that felt bone deep. Homeless, broke, and suddenly his evidence felt useless if he couldn't survive long enough to use it. He rode out the night in a 24-hour laundromat, dozing in a plastic chair while dryers hummed. At dawn, he turned toward the courthouse anyway. The clerk, same tired eyes, shook her head. Judge Crowell's calendar is full. No new motions until next month. Next month, Darius snapped. They'll sell the house. She lifted her hands. I don't make the rules. He stumbled outside, heart slamming, doors slamming, lifelines snipped. For the first time since this began, defeat felt real, cold, and near. That night, he parked beneath a jittery street lamp, staring at the courthouse silhouette. He'd poured in time, money, sanity, and the system chewed, shrugged, and spat him out. He thought of his mother, Ella's calloused hands after double shifts, the small proud smile when she lit the match over the paid-off note. She'd fought a rig that never played fair and never quit. Neither would he. With shaking fingers, he tapped into the diner's Wi-Fi from the car and drafted an emergency motion. Newly discovered fraud and possible judicial misconduct. He attached Lena's screenshots, Denise's affidavit, a timeline of every retaliatory strike, then e-filed it and blasted copies to local newsrooms. Sleep never came. He woke stiff and cold behind the wheel, courthouse steps in view like a dare. The phone buzzed. Email notification. Emergency motion hearing scheduled. Friday 10 around a.m. Relief flared, then caution smothered it. Friday was 2 days away. The bank wouldn't sit still. Evidence wasn't enough anymore. He needed allies. That afternoon, he walked into the Justice Collective's narrow office, a civil rights shop with scarred tables and determined eyes. The receptionist eyed his battered backpack. Appointment? No, he said, laying down the folder. But I've got proof. Bank fraud, witness harassment, court gaming, he said. If no one helps, they walk. She watched him, then picked up the phone. Wait here. 15 minutes later, Darius sat across from Terrence Boyd, tall, graying, carrying the exhaustion of 1,000 fights. Boyd paged through silently, then whistled, low. He held the email chain between Landon and Klein to the light. They barely hit it, he said. Textbook foreclosure fraud. Crowell's fingerprints don't help. He met Darius's eyes. You realize this could blow the city open. Will you help? Darius asked. Boyd nodded. We'll file an amicus to back your motion and prep fast for Friday. But this isn't just a house anymore. You push. You'll expose a network. Bank, judge, maybe higher. They'll hit harder. Darius's jaw set. They already took everything. Boyd weighed him, then offered his hand. All right, let's make noise. For 48 hours, the Justice Collective worked nonstop, drafting briefs, calling reporters, and rallying community groups. Darius ran on caffeine and grit as the city held its breath. Friday dawned gray and cold. Darius stood outside the courthouse, clutching the worn manila folder that had become his lifeline. Kayla arrived first, worry bright in her eyes. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," he said, squeezing her hand. Denise Fuller hurried up, glancing over her shoulder. "I'm here. I'll testify," she said, breath short. "If they retaliate—" "Reporters are inside," Boyd cut in, stepping to Darius's side. "Public record changes everything." Together they climbed the steps into a courtroom packed with activists, press, and onlookers. Near the back, Lena lifted a small nod, steadying him. At plaintiff's table, Bryce Landon sat stiff as glass, smugness cooled to calculation. Judge Evan Crowell swept in, already irritated by the click of lenses. The gavel cracked. "Emergency hearing regarding 1628 Pineland Avenue," he announced. "Mr. Rowe, proceed." Darius rose, heartbeat hammering. He'd rehearsed this moment until the words engraved themselves. "Your Honor, this foreclosure rests on forged papers. The supposed second mortgage was notarized without my mother's presence. The notary, Miss Fuller, is here." Crowell's eyes flickered. Annoyance, maybe fear, then flattened. "Proceed." Denise stepped up, hands trembling. Under Boyd's steady questions, she admitted she'd stamped the document without witnessing the signature, pressured by a bank runner. Landon leapt. "Objection! Irrelevant hearsay." Darius lifted the email chain. "Not irrelevant," he said. "Emails between Mr. Landon and Mr. Klein show they knew and rushed eviction anyway. Shortcutting procedure to dodge scrutiny." Murmurs rippled. Crowell hammered. "Order. Proof of authenticity." Boyd rose. "Subpoena served yesterday. Metadata confirms it." Landon blanched, whispering hard toward the bench. For a breath, Darius saw dismissal coming. Evidence be damned. Then phones flashed. The murmur swelled. And Crowell's gaze swept a packed room he couldn't control anymore. Reality landed. This had already escaped chamber walls. He sighed, tapped the gavel. "Full review of process and document authenticity is ordered. Foreclosure stayed. Mr. Rowe retains possession." Darius's knees almost buckled. A win. Thin, temporary, real. As the crowd filed out, Landon brushed past, voice a knife. "You think this ends here?" "No," Darius said. "Do you?" Cameras flared outside. Boyd fielded questions while Darius stood quiet, exhaustion settling like sand. Kayla's hand slid into his. "You won," she whispered. "For now," he rasped. "They'll come back harder?" Of course they would. The bank had too much to lose. Crowell too many secrets to bury. He'd forced light into their corners and cornered animals snap. Had he secured a home or triggered a backlash big enough to burn everything left? He straightened the folder and squared his shoulders anyway. The morning had an edge. Cold warning stitched into the air. Inside, reporters jammed the benches despite half-hearted courtroom warnings. Landon sat polished, but tension ticked in his jaw. Taps beat a metronome against counsel table. Behind him, Garrett Klein muttered to a junior associate. Reinforcements. Darius had no cavalry, just Boyd, Denise, and the truth. Crowell entered with a scowl carved deep, gavel cracking hard. "We're here on Mr. Rowe's emergency motion alleging foreclosure fraud by First Meridian Bank," he announced. "Mr. Landon," opening statement. Landon stood, buttoned, and poured honey. "Your Honor, this is an emotional delay tactic. Mr. Rowe defaulted. The bank followed routine procedures, as in thousands of similar matters. Claims of fraud arise from hearsay and a misunderstanding of process. We sympathize, but sympathy cannot supplant law." He sat with a faint, dismissive smile. Crowell turned. "Mr. Rowe?" Darius rose, the room's weight pressing on his ribs. He met Kayla's eyes, clasped fingers, quiet prayer, then stepped forward and let the facts lead his feet. "Mr. Landon is right about one thing. The law matters," he said. and the bank broke it. He held up two versions of the mortgage, the 2015 original and the 2021 modification used to justify foreclosure. Compare the signatures. The later one is shaky, misaligned. Signed while my mother lay hospitalized after a stroke. The notary named on it, Miss Fuller, never witnessed it. She's here. Denise testified again, steadier this time. A bank representative delivered papers already signed. She stamped them without seeing the signer. Landon sprang up. Objection! Irrelevant to foreclosure. Crowell's hand cut the air. Overruled. If the mortgage is falsified, foreclosure falls. Boyd slid another exhibit forward. Chain of title, he said. Every transfer requires endorsement. The final handoff to First Meridian. Missing endorsement. The bank never owned the loan it foreclosed on. The gallery leaned in. Keyboards clattered. Landon's jaw flexed. He whispered toward Klein, whose fingers pecked at his phone like a telegraph, tapping panic across a wire no one else could see. Crowell rubbed his temple. Mr. Landon, where is the missing endorsement? Landon stood, composure fraying. Electronic transfers sometimes delay physical endorsements. It doesn't change the underlying debt. Boyd's reply landed crisp. It changes standing. No endorsement, no right to foreclose. Crowell exhaled, fingers drumming. Produce the original documents and endorsement, he ordered. Landon hesitated a beat too long. We'll need time. Boyd pounced. They've had months. They can't produce what doesn't exist. Silence thickened. Crowell leaned back, eyes measuring a corner he couldn't dodge. Recess. 20 minutes, Crowell declared. In the aisle, Darius whispered to Boyd, He's stalling. Buying time, Boyd said. Calling upstairs. They're deciding settle quiet or fight dirty. Kayla hurried over. You're winning, she said, grip fierce on his forearm. Which makes them dangerous, Darius answered. 30 stretched to 40. When they reconvened, Crowell's expression had cooled to stone. Mr. Landon, the documents. Landon smoothed his tie. Unexpected delays retrieving originals. We maintain foreclosure was lawful. Mr. Rowe's claims are frivolous. Crowell's jaw worked. He glanced at reporters, the restless gallery, the man who'd refused to go quietly. The court finds grounds to question the foreclosure's validity, he said, gavel striking. Stay remains. Bank must produce originals within 7 days. Failure will result in dismissal. Murmurs rolled. Darius exhaled, hands shaking. Not victory, not yet, but a forced retreat. As the crowd thinned, Landon brushed close, eyes like ice. You've made enemies you can't imagine. Darius didn't blink. So have you. Outside, Boyd clapped his back. Now we lock the exits. Darius knew better than to exhale. Cornered predators don't retreat, they lash out. 2 days later, an email pinged. Plaintiff's emergency motion to dismiss defense claims for lack of merit attached. Landon's long brief, branding Darius's accusations baseless, the missing endorsement clerical, urging foreclosure to proceed. It wasn't defense. It was attack. He called Boyd. Frustration tightened Boyd's voice. They're trying to outrun the 7-day deadline. We respond now. By sundown, the Justice Collective filed a counter. No originals equals no standing, plus Denise's affidavit and Lena's memos. The court, feeling the media's breath, slotted an expedited hearing for Monday. But Friday night carried another kind of chill. Near the motel, a black SUV idled. 2 men stepped out, dark suits, professional detachment. Mr. Rowe, one said, flashing a private investigator badge. Questions regarding alleged fraudulent filings in your case. Darius's pulse thudded. Alleged by whom? Confidential. Please come with us, or we'll involve law enforcement. Every instinct screamed. You have a warrant? He asked. A court order? Silence, stretched taut. Don't make this difficult, the first man said. Darius lifted his phone. Touch me. This goes to my cloud and to the Justice Collective live. The men traded a glance, measuring headlines against intimidation. They retreated to the SUV without another word. Message delivered. We can reach you anywhere. Shaken, Darius called Boyd from the stairwell. They're rattling you, Boyd said, anger caged. That means you're close. Stay low, stay smart. I'm making calls. The weekend became a blur of preparation and shallow sleep, dread pacing the edges. Sunday night, Denise and Lena joined him at Boyd's office. They walked through testimony again, tightening every hinge. Lena looked wrung out. If they lose, this isn't just your house, she said quietly. It exposes the scheme. Then let them fight, Darius answered, resolve sharpening. Monday dawned clear and cold. Kayla waited on the courthouse steps with coffee and a look that said both fear and faith. Whatever happens, you've already done more than anyone expected, she said. Not enough, Darius murmured. Not until the house is safe. Inside, tension crackled. Landon sat composed, eyes flicking toward the press row more than once. Behind him, Klein looked drained, jaw tight. Crowell entered, gavel sharp. We're here on plaintiff's motion to dismiss and defendant's counter. Mr. Landon, he said. Landon rose, voice even. This case has dragged on. Mr. Rowe hasn't produced concrete evidence of fraud. Any discrepancies are minor clerical errors. The foreclosure was lawful. Crowell nodded, unreadable. Mr. Boyd? Boyd stood calm. If this were clerical, where are the originals? They can't produce what they never had. He gestured to Denise. We have sworn testimony that the purported modification was never witnessed. That's not clerical, it's fraud. Crowell peered at Denise. Do you stand by your affidavit? She nodded, voice steady. Yes, Your Honor. I was misled by a bank runner. I stamped a signature I never saw. Landon's calm fissured. The bank was unaware of notarial issues, he snapped. This is an attempt to smear standard practice. Darius rose. What's desperate is the cover-up. The missing endorsement proves they never owned what they foreclosed. He laid a thick folder on the rail. 5 years of cases. Families like mine clustered in the same neighborhoods, the same shortcuts. This isn't an exception. It's a pattern. The gallery buzzed. Crowell's stare slid to Landon. Can your client produce original endorsed documents? Landon hesitated. We're still reviewing records. The gavel cracked. Enough. The motion to dismiss is denied. Discovery continues. Darius's breath caught. Then the blade. Mr. Rowe, 10 days to show intentional fraud beyond procedural error, or we don't proceed to trial. Then victory. Steep demand. The room emptied around him. Boyd's hand settled on his shoulder. We bought time, but Crowell's hedging, giving them one last lane. Darius nodded. 10 days to prove intent, or months of pain collapse into dust. He knew the bank's playbook by heart. Drown him in paper, rattle witnesses, conjure new documents. Still, he'd come too far to fold. 10 days to find the piece that knocks the first domino into the whole crooked line. He squared the folder. Then we find the linchpin. He left Boyd's office with a clock ticking behind his ribs. 10 days to prove intent, or watch everything crumble. He started by mapping the players, Landon, Klein, Crowell, and the unnamed runners moving forged papers. He flagged gaps in email threads, traced routing metadata, and listed everyone who touched his file by title, date, and task. Then he called in favors, the barber shop, the church office, Mrs. Hightower's neighbor who worked nights in courthouse IT. Somewhere, someone kept receipts the bank prayed nobody would find. At the library, he rewired his workflow. One binder for chain of title, one for notary failures, one for standing, one labeled intent in red tape. He diagrammed a timeline on butcher paper and stuck it to the motel wall with painter's tape. Dots became arrows. Arrows became patterns. Patterns became motive. By midnight, he had a hypothesis. The revised filings were pushed through a shadow queue, greased by someone near the judge's staff, enough to sprint past scrutiny without leaving fingerprints obvious to civilians. He spent morning hours calling reporters off record, planting stakes. If anything happened to Lena or Denise, names would go public. Then he drafted affidavits memorializing intimidation, the black SUV, the badge flash, the thinly veiled threat, paperweights against a storm. At lunch, Kayla found him on the library steps with sandwiches and a look that could carry a man. "You'll find it," she said. "I have to," he replied. Somewhere between anger and exhaustion, his focus sharpened into something steadier than adrenaline: craft. Boyd looped him into a Zoom with a digital forensics volunteer who'd worked bank cases before. "Look for misaligned timestamps between email header hops and server logs, Xiao," she said. "If someone injected or backdated filings, the internal clock drift tells on them." Darius forwarded Lena's screenshots. The volunteer overlaid metadata against public docket entries. 2 filings appeared a minute before the courthouse server recorded receipt. Impossible unless a privileged account bypassed the queue. Darius wrote the times twice, like coordinates to a door. By evening, he'd circled a familiar name in the server logs, a courthouse admin account tied to Crowell's assistant. He didn't trust coincidences. He drafted a preservation letter demanding system backups, access logs, and queue rules from the relevant week. Boyd reviewed, tightened the language, and fired it off with a carbon copy to the media list. If anyone hit delete now, they'd be deleting on notice. Darius rechecked the chain of title binder, tracing the missing endorsement like a hairline cracked through porcelain. 2 days into the countdown, Landon's office dumped 300 pages at 4:59 p.m., most of it photocopied noise. Darius brewed motel coffee and read line by line until sunrise, tagging anomalies in sticky note constellations. One page carried a ghostly stamp from a third-party document processor he hadn't seen named before. He circled it, then called Lena. "Ever heard of Dockshore Analytics?" She cursed softly. "They batch clean metadata and repackage scans. If they touched your file, there's a raw image set somewhere." He spent the afternoon hunting corporate registrations and found a local address for Dockshore, a drab suite behind a tire shop. The receptionist insisted records were client confidential. Boyd faxed a narrowly tailored subpoena before sunset. While they waited, the forensics volunteer pinged. She'd cross-matched docket events with internal email times and found a recurring 58-second lead whenever Crowell's office flagged an urgent foreclosure. "It's a pattern," she said. "Same lead, different cases. Patterns make judges nervous. Patterns prove intent." That night, the motel lock scraped again. He'd wedged a door brace and a chair under the knob. The frame shuddered once and stopped. Footsteps retreated. He sat breathing through his teeth, counting to 20 before moving. Fear didn't get to write the plan. He texted Boyd, then Kayla. Alive, safe, working. He returned to his butcher paper and drew a red box around intent. If he couldn't find a smoking gun, he could build a furnace of circumstantial heat, strong enough to bend steel. Dockshore folded quicker than he expected. Their counsel called Boyd, agitated but compliant. Ingestion logs, checksum manifests, and a sample of raw rasterized pages delivered by courier. Darius laid the printouts across the motel bed. There it was, hashes that didn't match the bank's production set, a missing page ID that reappeared in later revisions. In a margin, a technician had typed a note. Client requested expedited redaction. Keep prior image set on LTO 7. He closed his eyes. They archived the truth. By noon, the courier returned with 2 DVDs and a chain of custody form that might as well have been a fuse. Boyd's paralegal set up a viewer in the collective's back room. Side by side, the revised notarized page didn't just differ. It showed a pixel halo around the signature block, compression artifacts the untouched scan lacked. Overlay analysis lit the sham like neon. "Cut and paste," the forensics volunteer said flatly over speaker. "Classic." Darius didn't smile. He thought of Ella's steady handwriting and felt his jaw set. He still needed words from inside the machine. Lena tapped an old contact, a former IT contractor who'd walked away after a compliance fight. They met at a park under whirring cicadas. The contractor kept his cap low and voice lower. "There's a meeting archive," he said. "Quarterly ops calls recorded by default." If Klein bragged anywhere, it would be there. He scribbled a location on a napkin. An internal share, the mislabeled from a decommissioned project. I didn't tell you that, he added, already rising. Darius and Lena huddled over a loaner laptop at the collective, the share mounted, directory by directory, until a folder labeled Q3 Ops Audio blinked into view. They clicked a file stamped 3 months prior. Voices bled from tinny speakers. Compliance, collections, Klein, and then the line that pinned Darius to his chair. If we pace filings just right, by the time signatures get questioned, the docket's already moved. Courts hate rewinding. Keep pressure on. Lena stared at the waveform like it was a confession. They didn't cheer. They made copies. 3 drives, 2 envelopes, 1 lockbox. Boyd drafted an emergency supplement, authenticated audio, dockshore artifacts, Q-drift analysis. If Crowell sits on this, we'll file it under his name, Boyd said. Sunlight either way. Darius added an exhibit index, keyed to timestamps and transcripts, cross-referenced to docket lags. Kayla poked her head in with a bag of takeout and a nurse's instinct for triage. Eat, drink water, breathe. He obeyed in that order and kept going. Monday's hearing felt like standing on a live rail. Reporters lined the back, activists filled pews. Landon flicked his cuffs and pretended boredom that didn't reach his eyes. Crowell called the case. Boyd rose. Supplemental proffer, Your Honor. Evidence of deliberate pacing to evade scrutiny. He cued the audio. Klein's voice flooded the room. By the time they realize signatures don't match, it won't matter. The court will side with us. Keep pushing. A rustle moved through the gallery, like wind through paper. Landon shot up. Objection! Illegally obtained. Inadmissible. Boyd barely turned. Whistleblower affidavit attached. Chain of custody intact. Authenticity supported by system logs. Crowell pinched the bridge of his nose, then gestured. Play it again. The second pass sounded worse, calmer, colder, like someone reciting policy. Darius watched Klein's complexion fade to paper. Denise folded her hands and stared at the floor. Kayla squeezed Darius's shoulder. Crowell looked at Landon, as if the room had finally given him permission to be suspicious. Boyd pressed while the iron glowed. This isn't clerical error. It's strategy. He slid Doc Shore's hash manifests forward. Here are mismatched checksums proving substitution. Here are overlays showing fabricated signatures. Here are Q logs timed to the judge's staff. He let the stack speak. Crucial's eyes tracked left, right, down. For once, Darius thought he saw respect cut through irritation, a judge realizing he'd been used, or worse, implicated. The gavel touched wood without sound. The air held its breath for him. He didn't wait for advisement, he ruled. Sufficient evidence of malicious foreclosure practice exists. The foreclosure of 1628 Pineland Avenue is nullified, effective immediately. The words landed like a bell. A reporter's pen snapped. Denise exhaled a prayer. Darius closed his eyes and saw his mother laughing in the kitchen, lighter in hand, mortgage burning to ash. Crowell continued, voice clipped. An independent investigation of First Meridian's foreclosure procedures is ordered. The State Bar will review counsel's conduct. Outside, flashbulbs strobed. Boyd fielded questions with a fighter's grin. Darius stood at the edge of the scrum, letting relief seep in carefully, like pouring hot coffee into a cold cup. Kayla slipped her fingers through his. You did it, she whispered. We did, he said, glancing toward Lena and Denise. The victory felt real and fragile. Institutions don't vanish, they regroup. He watched courthouse doors as if another motion might burst through, some paper grenade with his name on it. Nothing came. Not yet. That evening he walked the cracked sidewalk to the house he'd nearly lost. The deed, freshly stamped, sat in a plastic sleeve. He ran a thumb over Ella Rowe's name, whispering apology and promise. Inside, rooms echoed, but memory filled the quiet. The couch that had been hauled to the curb, the wallpaper that clung anyway, the table where he mapped a war from library printouts. Boyd arrived on the porch with a manila envelope. Settlement, he said. They want you quiet. Darius's mouth flattened. He read the offer. 6 figures, enough to rebuild, and the clause that mattered: global release and non-disclosure. Buy silence, bury the trail. He looked up. Boyd shrugged carefully. No shame in taking a win and moving on. You've already changed things. Darius folded the papers and slid them back. If I sign, the investigation starves. Likely, Boyd admitted. Your call. He thought of Denise's trembling oath, Lena's vanished badge, Kayla's frightened nights. Tell them no, he said. Justice doesn't wear a muzzle. Fallout moved faster than rumor. The audio hit evening news. The overlays went viral. State investigators served warrants at First Meridian's regional office. Bankers wheeled boxes past cameras with their eyes down. Klein resigned to spend time with family. Landon's firm suspended him pending bar review. Crowell found himself the subject of an ethics inquiry over undisclosed ties. Darius watched the swirl from his porch with a chipped mug and a steady hand. Victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like accountability. A woman and her teenage son stopped at the fence. Mr. Rowe, she asked. My sister was about to lose her place. Same bank, same forged mess. They dropped it after your case. Thank you. He swallowed against a sudden ache. That's why we fight, he said simply. After they left, he sat on the step until porch light bugs orbited like tiny planets. He'd won a battle and lit a beacon. The war, structural, stubborn, would keep shifting shapes. Now more people could see it. The bank appealed 2 procedural points and tried to narrow the investigation's scope. The Justice Collective answered with a public archive, redacted exhibits, timelines, explainers ordinary folks could use to audit their own cases. Community clinics sprang up on Saturdays. Denise trained volunteers on notary law. Lena coached homeowners on paper trails and public record requests. Darius showed up with coffee, chairs, and the calm rhythm of a man who outlived a storm. He wanted fewer headlines, more kitchen tables with answers. When Kayla asked what he wanted, finally he said, sleep and drywall. They spent weekends repairing what the eviction crew hadn't broken, patching holes, repainting the hallway a brave, warm color that looked like late light. He framed the deed and hung it above the table, where a new map lived. This one of workshops, court watch shifts, and dates he'd promised to show up for strangers who felt like family. You're building something, Kayla said softly. I'm rebuilding, he answered, with better blueprints. A week later, a brown envelope arrived with no return address. Inside, photocopies of invoices billed to Urgent Docket Services, LLC, a shell tucked neatly beneath court procurement. Vendor signatures matched Crowell's assistant's initials. Boyd raised an eyebrow. That's gasoline. He filed it with the Oversight Committee and sent a courtesy copy to 3 newsrooms. Darius watched the story unspool without touching it, learning the discipline of letting institutions fight institutions while he kept the porch light on for neighbors. Landon cornered him once in a parking garage, shadow sharp under concrete. You made a career mistake, he said pleasantly. You could have left with money. Darius kept walking. I left with a house. Landon's smile thinned. You left with attention. Attention fades. Darius stopped long enough to meet his eyes. Truth doesn't. He walked away, feeling the tremor of anger under his sternum and the steadier hum of purpose over it. Some men need a fight to feel important. He needed a community to protect. The investigation widened. Former employees surfaced with snippets, a training deck normalizing throughput metrics, a flowchart that routed complex files through a review light path whenever quarterly targets lagged. Patterns hardened into a wall. In a televised committee session, a softly spoken data analyst mapped the 58-second cue lead like a heartbeat on a monitor. This was engineered, she said. Darius watched from his couch, hand around a cooling mug, feeling something like grief for all the doors closed quietly before his. Reporters kept calling. He learned to say little and point them toward the collective. The house grew fuller, folding chairs, a donated bookshelf, a box of mismatched mugs. On the fridge, he taped a photo of Ella in her diner uniform, crooked smile unbothered by long shifts. "We're not done," he told the picture, half embarrassed, wholly sincere. Outside, kids chalked hopscotch grids on cracked concrete. Inside, he wrote a checklist for the next clinic: copies, scanners, translation help, rides, snacks. One afternoon, Denise arrived with fresh resolve. "I'm keeping my commission," she said, chin high, "but I'm changing how I work. No more shortcuts for anybody." She handed Darius a small box, her old stamp, retired. "For the mantle," she smiled. Lena followed with a folder, job applications to nonprofits and legal aid. "I thought I was done," she admitted. "I was wrong. I just needed a different fight." Darius set out 3 mugs and poured coffee like a blessing you say with your hands. Crowell took the stand in a hearing he couldn't control, answering questions about vendor relationships and staff practices. He spoke in polished lines until confronted with invoices and Q logs. Then his voice lost a layer of lacquer. The committee recessed without theatrics. Darius turned off the stream and sat with the quiet. None of this rewrote history for families already displaced, but it could make the next family harder to bulldoze. He let that thought settle where bitterness had lived. Night fell soft. Kayla leaned into his shoulder on the porch swing. "When does it end?" she asked. "Maybe it doesn't," he said. "Maybe it changes shape. Maybe ending isn't the goal." She nodded against him. They sat through the cricket chorus until a neighbor's porch light blinked 3 times. "A new code for you good." He blinked back twice. "Good." Sometimes survival was administration, check-ins, casseroles, a folded 20 slipped into a clinic donation jar. Sometimes justice looked like fresh paint. A law professor emailed, asking him to guest lecture. He laughed, then said yes, then panicked. He wrote notes on index cards and told 20 students about chain of title, standing, cue drift, and the power of noticing patterns nobody pays to see. He talked about Ella without naming her, and about how neighbors change outcomes faster than policy. After, a student with a neon binder asked, "How do we not burn out?" He said, "Trade shifts, protect sleep, choose lanes, share wins." She understood. Some nights the old fear knocked anyway. He'd wake thinking the key card might fail again, the couch might sit on a curb, the badge might flash at dusk. He'd get up, walk the hall, Ella papered, and touch the frame around the deed until his breath slowed. Then he'd open a window and let the night in. Healing wasn't a finish line, it was a practice. He learned to keep fruit on the counter, gas in the car, and backups off-site. He and Boyd sketched a small toolkit people could download: sample preservation letters, subpoena templates, a checklist for spotting doctored scans, a guide to respectful court watching. The PDF wasn't glossy, it was useful. Community groups printed stacks and passed them like hymnals. Local pastors preached about paperwork as neighborly love. A barber kept clipboards by the mirror. A baker stapled hotline numbers to pastry boxes. A city is an organism, Darius thought. You feed it better habits, it grows new reflexes. A reporter asked if he'd forgiven anyone. He thought about it longer than expected. "Forgiveness isn't clearance," he finally said. "It's choosing what doesn't live in my head rent-free. Consequences still matter." The quote ended up in a sidebar nobody clipped. He didn't mind. He cared about the email from a grandmother in another county who used their checklist to stall a sale long enough for a legal aid lawyer to take her case. "Your paper saved our address," she wrote. Paper could do that. One bright morning, he replaced the warped front door with a sturdy slab of oak. He and Kayla argued, laughed, measured twice, and cursed gently when the hinges fought. When it finally swung true, they stood back and admired a rectangle of ordinary triumph. He told Kayla he wanted to invite neighbors for gumbo once the paint dried. "Make it a clinic plus supper," she said. "People come for food and leave with copies." He grinned. "That's strategy I can live with." She kissed his cheek, paint smeared. The appeals court declined to interfere with the investigation. First Meridian issued a statement promising renewed commitment to integrity and launched a rebranding campaign with teal logos and soft focus stock photos. Nobody on his block cared. They cared when Denise got a commendation from a community board, when Lena started work at a tenants union, when Boyd's volunteers expanded clinic hours. Darius stacked chairs, scrubbed tables in, and learned which extension cords didn't trip circuit breakers when scanners hummed late. He kept the settlement envelope in a drawer as a reminder of the fork he didn't take. Sometimes he pulled it out to feel the paper's weight and remember why he'd said no, not to be a martyr, to be useful. Refusing silence had costs, but it bought a future where fewer people signed alone in rooms that felt like traps. On the envelope flap, he wrote a date and a word. Declined. Above it, he taped Ella's recipe for pound cake like a witness signature. One afternoon, he ran into Mrs. Hightower, leaving the community center with flyers. "You found their playbook," she said, eyes sharp with pride. "Now teach the neighborhood to read it." He laughed. "Yes, ma'am." She squeezed his arm. "Also, eat. You look like a man who forgets lunch." He promised, then bought 2 chili dogs and a bottle of water from the cart outside. The vendor waved off $1. "For the clinics," she said. He took one bite and tasted simple grace. Landon's disciplinary hearing streamed without fanfare. He spoke carefully about client advocacy and complex systems, then sat very still while exhibits scrolled, the email chain, the audio, the overlays. The panel thanked him and moved on. Darius turned off the laptop and stood at the sink, rinsing coffee cups. Not everything ends in spectacle, he thought. Some endings are just doors, closing with a clean click. He stacked the mugs to dry and felt for the first time the house breathing easier. He wrote a short op-ed at Boyd's insistence, How to Fight a Paper War. He told readers to gather documents early, to name files plainly, to request logs, and to be suspicious of speed. He ended with a note about neighbors and casseroles because systems weaken when communities repair what bureaucracy breaks. The paper ran it on a Tuesday. By Thursday, a small-town librarian emailed asking permission to print hundreds for a workshop. He wrote back, "Please, add your phone number. You'll be busy." On a rain-heavy afternoon, he visited Ella's grave with fresh flowers and a story. "We held the line," he said, brushing leaves from the stone. "You were right about stubbornness. It helps if you point it at something bigger than yourself." He stood quietly until the clouds thinned and the light turned gentle. Back home, he folded laundry, no longer living out of a bag. Normalcy felt like a luxury bought in installments. He intended to keep making the payments on time. This chapter closes where the fight began. A front porch, a deed, a son who wouldn't fold. If you believe refusing silence matters even when the odds snarl, drop a 1. Share this with someone who needs a map through bureaucracy's fog. Remember, patterns hide in plain sight. Paper leaves fingerprints. Neighbors make systems blink. Stay watchful, stay kind, and keep receipts. The machine isn't invincible. It just counts on fatigue. We count on each other. See you in the next story, and bring a friend.